topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in this week. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we've not met before and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. And my team and I at Gusto Now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a high-performance, invigorated culture and leadership activated by meaning and purpose. Our mission is to help our clients create a destination workplace where people flock to join, are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow into their full potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission, which all translates to higher profits for you. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com and elisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us today Pam August of the firm Connecting Potential, where she guides organizations, teams, and leaders to unlock the potential that is already there for transformational results. She was the Director of Culture Activation at WestJet, one of Canada's most admired corporate cultures, where for 14 years she was a fierce champion and developer of people and culture as a key enabler of strategic success. She is the author of Potential, How to Connect to What's Already There for Exponential Impact, which we'll be talking about today. She joins us today from her home in Prince Edward, Rhode Island. She also homes in Calgary, Canada. Pam, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Elise. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. As we were saying before we got on air, we're kindred spirits and doing some similar kind of work, care about some similar things. And I do like to celebrate, authors that bring their works into the world. So let's look at this beautiful thing that you put into the world.
My baby. My third baby.
It's totally a baby, as we were talking about. So hearty congratulations, Pam. It's beautiful. It's tight. It all hangs together beautifully. I love your model, which we'll talk about. But to kick us off here, I think it's important that we start with your really powerful story that you share in your book that really kicked off your own appetite to understand and grow potential. Let's start there.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's a story that came into my memory. I remembered it during the writing process. And it became very clear that it was the inciting incident, the thing that led me to this life journey. And it was a really, really lousy story.
Yes.
It was an example of everything not to do.
Yeah.
And, I was a young person, a little bit of a spoiler alert. It's a story at the beginning of the book. And I was a young woman who had really spent my whole life perfecting what I called the 3 Ps, which are pleasing, performing, and the third P, perfecting. And there probably was a 5th P, which was pressure. And so I really believed in order to be worthy and worthwhile, I had to do those things. And I was always that person. She would be amazing if she'd only just apply herself. And I found my thing, or so I thought. Well, I did find my thing. And I was put into, though, a very toxic learning environment. And I was told some horrific words that at the time it was probably the second most devastating conversation I'd ever had in my life. And at the time, it set me into quite a tailspin that not led me to, but probably was a catalyst for a lot of healing and really going deep inside to ask, what is it that I own? What is it that others own? And what is it, and who do I want to be in this world? And did you want me to share the quote? Because
Yes, I think it's important, because if
Yeah.
somebody were to receive the kind of message that you got, it would be interesting to see how they would handle that,
Yeah.
especially at the younger age that you were.
Yeah. So I think I was 23 at the time, and the words were this from a person in power, an instructor in a college program that had power over my education and my career, really, who said, I need to tell you that you have a personality defect that will prevent you from ever being successful in life. I'm only telling you this because I care, and you need to know it now. Even as I say the words now, and it was a long time ago, my heart pounds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I actually believed it to be true already.
Sure.
And this was just affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I was laughing because the bit about I'm only telling you this because I care is the part that really, zings it home. But listeners and viewers, I want you to think back for yourselves. Every one of you has something, some kind of message that that's been delivered to you that is hanging heavily on your heart and soul, and probably weighing you down and detracting you from realizing more of your own potential. So this conversation is for you too. All of us. And I have a story like that too, which we don't need to talk about now because we're going to talk about the good stuff in your book. But it's important that we anchor that with because you've blown way past what this person thought of you. Mm-hmm. So, but one important thing that you've come to that I really appreciate about your book is you've really distinguished that most of us tend to employ a problem-oriented thinking way of going through life. And of course, that's one way to do it. You of course embrace the potential piece, but why do you think most of us tend to employ the problem-solving approach instead of the potential one?
Yeah. And I think, I think there's no shortage of problems in the world to solve.
Right.
and not to say that solving problems is not a worthy pursuit and an important endeavor. I mean, it's why I have the work I do, why you have the work you do, why many of us have the work that we have. The problem with a problem mindset is that when we have a mindset of problem, that's all we see.
Yeah.
And really, we come by it honestly because we're wired to act first, feel second, think last, because we're wired to be safe, to discern or, discover or uncover or detect threat, and then think about what we need to do to act to stay safe. And so we have this, negativity bias that's wired into us that serves us well in some situations. The problem is we use it in all situations, or at least far too many. And so when we see a problem, what we're doing is we're priming ourselves to take action on something we want to move away from, something that potentially is a threat or an annoyance or a frustration. But that away response in our nervous system, or what I call operating system, is perceived like a threat. And it creates a neurochemical cocktail that includes things like cortisol and adrenaline and all of those things that actually contract us and disconnect all the parts of us that make it harder to actually get where we want to go, which is our potential, much less solve the problem that we want to avoid, which comes from that problem mindset.
Beautifully explained. Okay, so now let's take it another step further here. If we abandon that approach and we now embrace the potential thinking mindset, paint for us the promise of that.
Yeah, so I would say in any situation, in any challenge, in any difficulty, there is something that wants to happen. And that something is potential. And just before this call, I shared I do this as a facilitator and coach and educator. What's present for me in the moment is always what comes out. Yeah. And so we just had a quick chat about this, and one of my dearest and longest friends made the essential and excruciatingly difficult decision to stop cancer treatment after 4.5 years of dealing with ovarian cancer. And this woman, I know she wouldn't mind me telling her story, but I will keep her name confidential, she's just the most incredible human, because throughout these 4.5 extremely difficult years, 80 rounds of chemo, 5 surgeries, septic clots in her lungs, like we're talking existential threats here. what she was able to do was be real with the problem, be real with the trauma, be real with the difficulty. And then what felt very quickly to me observing and being with her was turn it into what wants to happen here. And the thing, like just even now, there's been more bad news. And what wants to happen is she wants to connect with people. She wants to use this time to form, reform, reinvigorate connections. Like to me, I don't, inspiring's not even enough of a word because it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
And so potential, in a more like everyday occurrence, I was working with a leader who's really challenged in dealing with conflict. Problem. I'm challenged dealing with conflict.
Yes.
And I said to her, so what wants to happen instead? And she said, I want to show up powerfully to work through challenges and still be collegial or in a relationship. I said, okay, that's the potential. So I said, what shifted when you move from, so say to yourself, I'm not good at conflict. The challenge is conflict. What happens? And she goes like this. And I say, okay, so now what happens when you say the potential, what wants to happen is for me to show up in a way that builds relationship and deals with messy issues. What's different? And she said, well, I lean forward. I said, yes, because potential is what we move toward. I didn't say this in the book, or maybe I did. I can't remember now. But potential is all around us. The only place it's not is behind us.
Mm-hmm. I think you did say that in the book. Yeah. One of the things I like about what you said about potential, and then I do want to talk about adversity because that's so powerful, is, you say we have a deep need to bring it, that is potential, together and connect it. It is this force, this energy, and our desire and ability to connect it that is the catalyst and activator of personal and professional growth, deep learning, and transformed relationships, teams, families, and organizations. So powerful, Pam. And that's what you were just describing with your friend.
Yeah. Yeah, like it is. And again, I wanted to then come back to the more kind of everyday example, right? Because this thing called potential is always there in big and small.
Yes.
Right? In all of it, wanting to be connected. And it is really, like, if you think about it, in science terms, there's potential energy, right? And it's when you complete the circuit that the light goes off or the sound happens or whatever, the air conditioning comes on. It is this point of connection. And so that is why I use that verb, because often we talk about potential like it's something out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right.
But it's here now.
Mm-hmm.
It's here now.
I think that's so powerful.
It's something we can do.
Yes.
Again and again and again. And
mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm. This is where we also align, Pam. It's about that activation. It's also about, summoning your own sense of agency. And so releasing your own beautiful energies toward that aim. That's another connection point that we have. And I love that, just what you described.
I know. I feel like we've been just circling around waiting to connect.
Well, and like I said, I think somebody, did a brain meld between us, but just failed to tell both of us that it actually took place. But so you talked about, your friend going through, I'm just listening to the list of what your friend has gone through just is astounding to me. Again, I'm a logotherapist, so I'm present to the tremendous depth of power and strength that we have in our own human spirit. And that's always there to be able to be activated as well. And so, but I'm also really present to, and in my own life, the notion of struggle, challenge, adversity. I remember I used to say a long time ago in my life, I probably won't amount to very much because I really haven't been through very much. And so I'll probably just have a sort of a under the radar average life kind of thing. I still feel that there's there's such value in struggle and challenge, especially depending on how we relate to that. Now, I've since had a fair number of struggles since that time, so I hope I've allowed myself to elevate a little bit beyond what I thought I could do back then. But, this notion, I love what you say. You say the reality of resilience is it only develops through difficulty or challenge. It's never while we're sitting on the couch eating bonbons, ever.
Right.
There is no app for it, sorry, you say. While we can connect potential in situations that aren't difficult or challenging, what I have found is that difficulty and challenge lead to the most powerful connections of potential. These situations develop our resilience muscles and result in lasting transformations in their impact. Hear, hear. So powerful.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is too, I'm known as and I do say in the book, I actually don't like the labels of positive and negative. And largely due to this toxic positivity culture that we find ourselves in, right? Where we're constantly being bombarded with what's wrong with us, while at the same time being told, just put on that smile, right? And so I shared that early in the book and continue that theme throughout, because I want people to know that it's okay if sometimes things suck.
Yeah.
And it's okay when things don't work out. And it's okay when you screw up, when I screw up. All of it, it's just part of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to deny that those difficulties exist. And quite honestly, it's often not the big things that take us down. It's the little things over and over and over again.
Yes, yes.
Right. And so it's not to it's not to deny that those exist. It is to recognize that they actually can be and often are the catalyst to our biggest learning. Like when I ask groups, what has been, your biggest learning? It's often they report it's through some kind of real difficulty.
Right. I understand. That's a lot of the work that I do too, my dear. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Well, let's let our listeners and viewers reflect on maybe some of the things that maybe have been difficult in their lives as we go into our first break. And then after the break, we're going to get into your beautiful Connect Potential operating system, which is so compelling. So I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Pam August of the firm Connecting Potential, where she guides organizations, teams, and leaders to unlock the potential that is already there for transformational results. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I too am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work, are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I continue to research and write my own books. So one of my last ones came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I really wrote it to help leaders understand the changed workforce. What is it that they actually want from you as an employer? And then I give you 22 best practices to build into your culture to provide that for them. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Pam August. She's the author of Potential: How to Connect What's Already There for Exponential Impact, which we've been talking about today. So just before the break, we teased up that we wanted to share and get you to talk about your model. I really appreciate when people can create a model that conveys so much information and brings all the concepts together. And you've done that in your Connect Potential operating system. So can you first kind of just outline it? As you saw in our notes, I captured it for myself because I wanted to be able to keep it and understand it. But kind of walk us through it, please, Pam.
Yeah. So just a clarifying question. Do you want me to walk through like the whole macro?
Yeah, I start big, right? So that we can understand, why, how do the components hang together? Yes. And then we can talk through the pieces of it.
Perfect. Yeah. And so, it's actually one of the things in the book that I'm so grateful to my book, because it was the catalyst for me to really synthesize what I call a life's work of learning. And then when it happened, it was one of those things that now it's become this core foundation that everything seems to connect to. So what it is I'll kind of get into the elevator pitch for a moment, and then we can dive into the elements. It's really, the way I speak about it, it is one mindset shift from problem to potential, one operating system, which is us as human beings and our capacity to act, to feel, and to think, one core practice, which is intend, notice, and move, and then 3 dimensions of exponential impact. Because what I found in my work, and I'm sure you found the very similar things, is that working with thousands of people and hundreds of teams and organizations all over, is that this thing called potential lives simultaneously in 3 dimensions. It lives within us as individuals, it lives between us in our relationships and teams, and it lives around us in this thing called culture and community. And because all 3 of those are connected to each other, if you influence any one of them, you actually influence every one of them. And so that's why I make this claim about exponential impact, right? So again, it's one mindset shift, one operating system, one core practice, and 3 dimensions of impact.
That's beautifully explained. Very, 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 very crisp. Again, so that what that also says, and I think I remember. I don't remember if you also were a professor in the university system. Were you?
Yes.
Yeah,
I taught post-secondary for 13 years.
Yeah, I thought I remember that. I also have been a professor, and what I learned in that role is that, right? Of course, that's what happened. We were issued the same way. Yeah. What I found is that when my students sent in their papers, the clarity of their writing indicated to me how much they understood the subject. When I got lost in their papers, I understood they didn't know what they were talking about. So this model really, really signifies the strength of your own knowledge, Pam. It's very impressive. You're very welcome. It's very impressive, very tight.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I've got on that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's talk through this. Let's kind of dive through those. We've already kind of handled, the mindset from problem solving to potential. I love that you did break down this, this idea of one operating system, that we do act, feel, and think. I think that's really important to understand those pieces. I definitely want you to talk about, the disconnected operating system versus the connected one, because you distinguish those beautifully. But you tell me how it's best to kind of really now start to do parts.
Well, I'll start with a fun little story. I think it's a fun story. I'll start with a story that hasn't happened yet, and then we'll go back and go through it.
How fun is that?
So the fun story, because I also do talk about in the book how we can time travel.
I loved that, by the way. I totally captured that. Yes.
Right. But we can't time travel in our bodies, at least not while we're recording this interview at this time. And so Dr. Dan Siegel, who was a leading mind in mindfulness, and I had the opportunity to learn with him years ago in Toronto. And he's, I'm a fangirl. I view him as one of my mentors. So this is the future story. He's doing a one-day mindfulness workshop in Oxford in England. My husband and I are ridiculous fans of British crime dramas. So we're going to the UK because I signed up for his workshop.
Well, of course.
I share his model in my book, and I'm giving him a signed copy. And so that's the future story.
Right.
But tying it back, though, Dr. Siegel so beautifully, and I encourage your listeners to look up his hand model of the brain, because it's just such a simple, visceral way to know about our operating system, which basically we're designed super quick through our brainstem and all the accompanying. And it's not as simple as I'm making it, but simple just to get the idea. We are designed for action first. And in fact, if we didn't move, we wouldn't even need a brain, right? Like we are designed for action. Our operating system, meaning our brain, is part of a whole system that's connected by the spinal cord. So we're designed for action first. We're designed for feeling second, which is the limbic system, which is literally the heart of the brain. And then we're designed to think last, which is the cortex. And on a good day, in a good moment, our operating system is connected. Our capacity and ability to act, feel, and think with energy, ease, and effectiveness can happen. And I got a joke. I do like the do, we're going through, everything's going well. The reality is, though, the world is a challenging world. It's complex, it's complicated, it's uncertain, it's chaotic, it's all of these things. And things happen that trigger us, that stress us, that wear us down. And when that happens, as Dr. Siegel puts it, we flip our lids. And our ability to act, feel, and think in an integrated, Dan's words, or connected, my words, way is gone. And so instead of energy, ease, and effectiveness, we end up in states that I've identified as strain, swirl, or stuck. And, again, this is all like these frames of energy, ease, and effectiveness and strain, swirl, and stuck really come through a lot of my experiential learning, again, working with thousands of people over years. And what I'm finding now, and I'm testing as I'm doing my teaching and coaching and things like that, is when I ask people to describe their state, it usually fits into one of those three things, where they can move, but it's hard. They're strained. They're going a million miles an hour using a word that I don't use, and I tell my readers not to use. It starts with B, right? Or they end up in that place of stuck where they can't move, right? So it's like we can move, but it hurts. We can't stop, or we can't move. And we've probably all had experiences of that. Whereas ease, energy is we're finished something and we actually feel energized by it. Mm-hmm. Ease is the thing's not easy necessarily, but our experience of it feels more easeful.
Yes.
And then effectiveness is we can get it done. And we're always flipping between those two. I found myself just now in answering that question, catching one moment where I thought, my brain is swirling. Breathe out. Okay, we're back.
It's beautiful. And it just really helps clarify, where are you in this? And so that's the
operating system.
Operating system. Okay, that's the act, think, feel. And I also found that fascinating that you aligned our different brains, to acting, feeling, and thinking. I think I knew that on some level, but that was so crisp. So that was really helpful to me, which then moves us then to one practice: intend, notice, and move.
Yeah. And so where that came from is, and just, my book ended up being a real active narrative nonfiction. That was not the book I planned to write. I planned to write a book that was more of I would say a clean how-to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the story I shared at the beginning was the catalyst for the storytelling in the book. And it really wanted to teach readers things that they could use. But then much more of my story ended up in the book than I had ever imagined. But it was what the book wanted. So
and nobody tells us when we start a book that books actually have their own personalities and sometimes their own agenda, right? They don't tell us that, and so you get this surprise, as you're writing a book. I know what you mean.
It started writing me. It was quite an incredible experience, and so this model framework of intend, notice, and move really came from work I do in more the area of somatics and educational kinesiology, which is movement to help rewire our nervous system. I was an aerobics instructor a long time ago, and a bodybuilder and a yoga teacher, and teach brain gyms. So everything I do is always embodied. And the reality is brains don't roll into the room. We all walk into our workplaces and we walk back into our homes as an embodied system. And so, the model of intend, notice, and move is intended to be, pun intended, to be a dynamic. Yeah. Because as human beings, we are dynamic systems. That setting intention, primes our operating system to focus on where we want to go, who we want to be. The noticing part, the middle part of the framework, recognizes the only place we can move from is where we are now. And if we don't notice our experience of now, we cannot be at choice about how we want to respond. Right? And then move is the thing that gets us from where we are or who we are being to where we want to go or who we want to be. And in the book, I teach about actual physical movement, really focusing on the breath because it's our most powerful catalyst to regulate ourselves all the time. And then I do get into, because I realized as I was doing this, gosh, everything I do, whether I'm coaching a leader, working with teams, working as a culture strategist, teaching in the college system, it's always about, here's where we want to go. Where are we now? What are the actions that we need to take to get there? Intend, notice, and move.
I think it's beautiful. And then you take us home and direct us through those 3 dimensions of exponential impact, of course, which you introduced ahead. And I think that's so powerful too, that last bit of your model, if you would take us through that.
Yeah, and I would say, gosh. So Elise, would you like me to take you through the parts or how the parts come together?
Well, just this notion, just even what you did at the beginning, just to bring the whole thing together, right? Because, this notion that, it's within us, between us, and around us is just really powerful when you turn on to that much potential.
Yeah. So I would say, okay. Yeah. So it's one of, so I think we've all had that experience, right? Where we've had that experience where we're not feeling it. We walk into a meeting, they're not feeling it. We leave the meeting and everyone around us, nobody's feeling it, right? Like we get into that, that place. And then I think we've all had that experience where you come into a situation and there's someone or something that happens that one person shows up with a lot of energy and potentiality, and they shift the dynamic that's happening in the relationships in that team. So people start talking to each other. And then as a result of that, things out in the world that they're working in start to happen differently. And then they start coming back and they say, oh, well, this thing happened. And we made progress on this and we made progress on that. And then that makes the team more cohesive. And then each member of that team feels more empowered as a member. I don't know if did that get at it?
No, that's absolutely beautiful. And now what that does is you've just put the whole thing together. Now let's take our last break and let our listeners and kind of viewers think about how that system hangs together, because after the break, I want to talk about how we can optimize your system to enhance effectiveness and energy. But so let's let them think about this first while we take our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We went on the air with Pam August of the firm Connecting Potential, where she guides organizations, teams, and leaders to unlock the potential that is already there for transformational results. We've been going through her beautiful Connect Potential operating system. She's now explained that to us. After the break, we're going to help you understand how to better optimize the system to enhance your own effectiveness and energy. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break that my last book came out in March of 2023, The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I created a 3-page assessment that you can take off my Gusto-Now site. It's free, and that will help you be able to identify where in your organization, in terms of your culture, that you're strong, or where you want to shore some efforts up to actually get yourself into a place that meets the discerning needs of today's workforce. If you are just joining us now, my guest is Pam August. She's the author of Potential, How to Connect What's Already There for Exponential Impact, which is what we've been talking about today. So now that we've explained that beautiful model here beautifully, now let's talk about how can people optimize the system to enhance their effectiveness and their energy.
Yes, I knew this question on the break. I was thinking about this. So I want to start with this analogy, I guess. We could, I worked in the fitness industry, health and wellness. I was a nutritionist actually in a former life.
I remember.
Yeah, but I didn't care what people ate, so it was a little bit of a career limiting move. I was more interested in so anyway, but I worked in fitness for a long time, and so January 2nd, fitness clubs are full. January 17th, they're starting to empty out.
Right.
And so here's the thing: is we can belong to the best workout facility, have the best equipment, best new runners, the best ergonomic leggings, the best trainer, and the best workout plan. If we do not do the reps, new muscles do not grow. That's it, right? Like there's no shortcut to anything. It's just doing the practice of intent. So a way that could look is I get up every morning and I ask myself, I say, what's a word that captures how I want to show up today? Intent. Notice. I check in and I notice, how am I now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's my physical experience like right now? Move. What's the one thing I need to do to start my day to move me closer to how I want to show up and how I intend to be? That's an example, right? And so it's the same thing. Before coming on this radio show, I asked myself, how do I want to show up? How am I now? What's the thing that I need to do? And what often shows up, which is why I teach it in my book in a number of different ways, is our breath is our most powerful tool to connect our potential. We're already doing it. When we do it intentionally, it's the only autonomic body process that we can do consciously as well. That's how powerful it is. And so one of my favorite mantras is I breathe in, I am ready. Breathe out, I'm relaxed. Because the in breath gets us ready for action, the sympathetic nervous system. The out breath lets us know we're safe and we can relax in action, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. So I would really, I tell my readers for 21 days, and 21 is probably not even the right number, but it's a place to start, is, every day, 3 times a day, set an intention before you go into a meeting. How do you want to show up? Before you're having that conversation with your child for the 5th time in the month, how do you want to show up? Notice how you are now. And what I find, and I found this a lot, is we like to skip the notice part because the reality is we're not going to be in alignment with our intention, usually. That's why we set it. And people, we don't like that. It makes us uncomfortable. But the great thing about that discomfort is it actually gives us the energy to move.
Yes. And
the reality is it's already happening. If we don't notice it, all we can do is continue reacting unconsciously. Once we notice our current state, like me coming on this interview, I do a lot of speaking and a lot of interviews and a lot of conversations. Every single time I feel nervous, right? And so it's important to notice that and then say, so what do I need to do to show up the way I want to show up, which is clear and connecting. And so that noticing really is a superpower, especially in today's highly distracted world. And then that move, if you do nothing else, just focusing on your breath,
where you lost your sound a little bit. So maybe come closer to your computer. There you go. You're back.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. We got that, I think. Okay. So Pam, that was beautiful. Just beautiful. Just a couple of weeks ago now, we had Finian Kelly on the program, and he was talking, he's very much about breath work, and he's in Denver, and he really taught us a lot about the power of breath work. I'm guessing that if just a couple of our listeners and viewers have just heard you explain that you want them to do this, check-in process 3 times a day, I can maybe do it once, but 3 sounds like a lot. But we've had other people on the program also giving very, very similar advice. 3 times a day is an important number. Can you maybe say a bit more about why 3 times a day?
Three is really a magic number. And three, like I'll just ask listeners right now to finish this silently in their heads. Finish these statements. Location, earth, wind, and
Fire.
Right? Blood, sweat, and
tears.
Lights, camera,
action.
Right? 3 is a magic number. And I found out through Google research that one of the reasons 3 is such a powerful number, it's the smallest unit that forms a pattern. Right? If we go, we're waiting for the third, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It is a powerful pattern former. And so that's why number 3 shows up so often in everything, because it's sticky, right? Now, having said that, if 3 times in one day is way too much, make it 3 times a week. Make it a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Maybe make it a Monday, Friday, and a Sunday, right?
Right. Just start. Exactly. Get in motion. Yes.
Just start. And honestly, it's, we'll get to this later, but what's the one thing, right? But 3 is a powerful number.
Mm-hmm. I so appreciate that. And the other thing, there are so many things about your book too that we could delve deeper into. Some of the stuff that I had planned to cover, I feel like you already did. But one thing I definitely wanted you to speak more to, because increasingly this program has evolved so much over the 9.5 years I've been hosting it. But I find myself getting really interested in neuroscience. And I really liked how you explain how you are connecting the potential operating system starts by looking at the brain, and then really recognizing how that interaction takes place. So you say in the book about, you're starting to notice, you say the operating system is much more than above the ears brain. And then you go on to say that neuroscience clearly shows that the human brain is part of a dynamic, interconnected system in the whole body via the nervous system. And you say the neurons, the cells that make up the nervous system, are found throughout the body. So when you hear things like trust your gut, or trust your heart, or go with your gut, there is an actual scientific basis for that. And I think it's fascinating. So if you could maybe say a bit more, help our listeners and viewers really understand this notion of this interconnected brain.
Yeah. Well, oh gosh. I mean, the simplest example is we say things. I need to sleep on it. I need to go get some fresh air to clear my head. We know that if we go for a walk and move our bodies, we can actually think more clearly. We feel better after being in nature, going to the gym. I'll really hone into one specific thing that I'm learning much more about these days, and that's the vagus nerve.
Yes.
And so the vagus nerve is a nerve that really runs, from our trunk all the way through our whole system up into our brain. And the vagus nerve is a powerful activator when it's regulating properly of our parasympathetic, our rest and digest nervous system. And so one of the things I learned recently in a program I was taking called the Neuroscience of Coaching is that and as a yoga teacher, I always tell my students to belly breathe, breathe deeply. Well, one of the things that happens when we breathe deeply is we actually put pressure on the vagus nerve that helps to tone it, which is why it's so calming, right? There are more nerve impulses going from the gut to the brain than the brain to the gut, right? And so if our brain below our ears is our sensory input system for our environment, all of our senses, I mean, we do have sight and hearing that's above the ears, but all of the tactile things, the proprioceptors, the things that let us know where we are in space, touch, feel, sensation, all of those things come in through these channels that are embodied in the body channels. They go to our brain. Our brain then uses past experience and future prediction to say, oh, these signals tell me this thing, so now this is the action I need to take. And these happen in milliseconds. And so then what happens is signals then go back into the body where we take action, right? So that, again, that intending starts us in this above the ear brain, the noticing when we notice what we're thinking, feeling, and experiencing, takes us into the whole system. And then move, whether it's physical action or more action, like I have this conversation, again, becomes a whole body thing. And I recently learned from, oh gosh, I'm going to forget Amanda's last name, Amanda Blake, your body is your brain. And I love what she said here, because I'm a strong proponent and have been for decades of experiential learning, right? That we have to experience something. We need to be able to observe and reflect on it. We need to be able to conceptualize it somehow, and then we need to actively experiment with it in order for learning to be complete. And she goes as far to say that sustained change and transformation must be experienced and embodied. Otherwise, it's just conceptual perception, is what she calls it, or what I call it, just an interesting idea.
That's so powerful.
The body is the vehicle with which we experience the world and with which we act on our experience. And it's part of an interconnected system.
Well, and that goes back to your first career, all the more reason that we need to take really good care of this vessel. I often think about the body, especially when we're thinking about how we're so different. I was issued this body. I didn't have any say in the matter, but I was issued this thing, and this is my vehicle to experience life. And so part of what I'm aware of is taking good care of it, giving it good food and exercise and rest and different experiences. So just all the more reason that you're really painting the picture of why to keep that strong and vital.
Well, and us being strong and vital, if we come back to the 3 dimensions, how we show up has impact.
Absolutely.
We're wired to mirror each other. We're wired to cue and sense and react or respond. And so you said it when we jumped on. Oh, I love your energy, right? I love your energy, and it becomes this thing that this is where when we say this, you need to show up. So what does it mean to show up? We need to show up in a way that we can bring our energy, that we can move with ease, and we can be effective. How might we do that? I propose it's intend, notice, and move, right? How do we do that as individuals? There's a variety of different ways. How do we do it in teams? It's very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a team, how do we want to be as a team? How do we want to show up? How do we know that we are working as a team? What do we notice about our team right now? Oh, we notice we're in silos. What's the action that we need to take? We need to come together, right? We use the language of movement even when we're talking about things that are more cognitive.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was a beautiful come to the close here, Pam. The show goes by so fast, especially when we have a good conversation. So let me give you a chance to close the conversation as you like. You know that this show is listened to by people around the world. They care either about elevating their own experience of work and realizing more of their own potential. They're trying to become a better leader. They care about building a powerful, effective culture. What would you like to leave them with?
I knew you were going to ask me the specific questions, and now I'm going, what do I want them to know? There's so many things. I think what I want listeners to know is wherever you are right now is exactly where you need to be, because it's where you are, right? And the only place that we can move from is where we are now. So just take a moment and notice, where are you now in as an individual? Where are you now as a team? Where are you now as an organization, as a parent, as a partner, as a friend? Ask yourself, how in alignment is where I am now with how I intend or want to be? And what's one action I can take to move into greater alignment?
Beautiful way to finish. Beautiful way to finish, new friend. Thank you so much for being on Working on Purpose and sharing your heart and soul with me and listeners and viewers. It is wonderful to know you, to learn from you, and we remain connected. Yes. Thank you, Pam.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about Pam August and stay connected with her as well, including learning more about the work she does at Connecting Potential, or learn more about her new book, or get your own copy. It's called Potential: How to Connect What's Already There for Exponential Impact. So one thing you could do, she's just doing a little cheerleading stand. One thing that you could do is go to her website to start. It's connectingpotential.ca, because she's in Canada. Connectingpotential.ca. You can also find her very easily on LinkedIn. I encourage you to open that conversation. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast or wherever you get your podcast. We were on with James Keyes, the former CEO of 7-Eleven and Blockbuster. He has had a lifetime commitment of education, serving as a founding director of the Dallas Education Foundation and is the founder of the Education is Freedom Foundation. He's also the author of Education is Freedom, The Future is in Your Hands, which is what we talked about. It was an incredibly inspiring conversation, which, in fact, we plan to bring back on a future date because there was so much we still wanted to discuss. Next week, we'll be on with Hunter Hastings, talking about his new book, Aberrant Capitalism: The Decay and Revival of Customer Capitalism, which shares the journey of how entrepreneurial capitalism evolved in the world and U.S., where it began its downfall, and the promise of yet another emergent era now in the corporations in the digital age. See you there. And remember, work is one of the best means and ways of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.